Today we are looking at Buffy the Vampire Slayer and I'm going to give you guys my ranking of every season in the series. As always guys, remember, if you have your own ranking, make sure you leave it down below. This isn't a ranking from worst to best because, let's be honest, there's not really a bad season of Buffy. Instead, this is my least favourite to favourite season overall. Kicking things off, we have season 1. This is pretty much the season that introduced us to Buffy, introduced us to the Scooby Gang, and really kind of showed us what the entire series of Buffy was going to be about. What I love about season 1 in particular is actually the standalone episodes. There is a lot of standalone episodes, but I actually think they help with character development. Willow gets her own standalone episode, Xander does, Cordelia does. So although they are kind of these monster of the week episodes, which I know people have issues with, it does kind of drag the season slightly, but I also think there's just a lot of room to get to know these characters, particularly when they're being attacked for their personality traits. So you do learn a lot about the individual characters, particularly the Scooby Gang who are helping Buffy. Speaking of Buffy, we do also of course get introduced to her. What I love about Buffy, she is just a teenage girl. She is interested in boys, in going on dates, and she kind of has this bubbly personality to her. She's quite quirky. She has this new outfit every single week. She kind of hates going on slaying duties, but at the same time she has this huge responsibility that she has to save the world. Giles has always been one of my favourite characters. He is a more serious character, he is a lot more grounded, but he also has a lot of comedic moments. He has some great one-liners and every single one of them hits.
This computer invasion that Willow's performing on the coroner's office, one assumes it is entirely legal.
Of course.
Right. Wasn't here, didn't see it, couldn't have stopped you.
Standout episodes of course include a two-parter premiere, which was actually quite daring to really finish the first episode off on a to be continued. Of course it's a way to draw people back next week, but it could have gone the other way. I think for a pilot in particular, the job of a pilot is to bring audiences in, set up this world and show them what the show is going to be about. This one instead almost cut it in half. We also have Angel, which I think is episode 7, and that of course sets up the big storyline between Buffy and Angel. These kind of ill-fated lovers, which we've seen now replicated with things like Twilight and The Vampire Diaries, but honestly, it's never been done as well as Buffy. I love the reveal of Angel being a vampire in that first season, how they kind of set up that he's this older guy, but you don't actually see it coming. At least I didn't, and I've seen quite a few people react to Buffy online, and most never see that coming. So I think it's a great twist. Other great episodes are the puppet show episode, Nightmares. What I like about season 1 is even though there's not a huge arc, there's not a lot of episodes, there are some great standout episodes. Now you still have your bad episodes.
I can't tell you how good it is to see you with my own two eyes.
That is one of the worst episodes, if not the worst episode of Buffy I've seen. I like the conversation about the internet, but it's just a bit bizarre. But then you have episodes like Witch, and of course you have the finale, the season finale of Buffy. That first season is absolutely brilliant and actually kind of set up what the show would be going forward. It was really the first time you got to see the acting chops of Sarah Michelle Gellar, but also how serious the show could be.
Giles, I'm 16 years old. I don't want to die.
It's a heart-wrenching finale to the show that again just shows us how deep it could go with future seasons. Overall, I'm a big fan of season 1 of Buffy. It has some great standalone episodes. It has a great setup introducing us to the world of Buffy, and again it really caps that season finale off in great style. Next up is season 7. This of course is the season that ended the show's run, and it does it in style. For me, what I love about this season is the big bad, the first evil. I think if you were going to end a show like Buffy that has had witches and vampires and demons, even gods, you kind of have to go all out for your final big bad. So the first evil, the one that really created vampires, demons and so on, is the best way to cap the show off. Now I do think they do run into issues with this season. I think the potentials do get a bit frustrating, they get a bit annoying. When you're first introduced to them, they are interesting characters, and I love the idea of the first really taking out all of the potential Slayers around the globe. It opens the show up to be a much bigger show. But once you spend enough time with them, they do get quite irritating. This season also has a lot of speeches. Buffy makes quite a lot of speeches, and although I do enjoy her speeches throughout the show's run, season 7 just does it a bit too much. As well as that, the last couple of episodes do get quite dark, and honestly I do think a few characters just make questionable decisions when it comes to Buffy. At the same time, I like the lighter tone of this season. Although I personally enjoy season 6, it is a very dark season, so I think coming back to that lighter tone similar to the first 3 seasons was the best choice they could have made. Bringing back Sunnydale High School was also a great little touch to cap the show off, and honestly spending more time with Dawn. Although Dawn was the focal point of season 5, I didn't really think we spent enough time with her getting to know the character. She just kind of came across as Buffy's irritating sister in that season, whereas with season 7 we really see her as a character develop and see kind of the trauma she's going through with high school life. We also again see a lighter version of all the other characters, particularly with Willow. She had her run as Dark Willow, and she's on this almost journey to really repair the damage she's done in this season. I thought they handled that very well. There's even a standalone episode where she really digs deep into the trauma she's caused, and that's one of my favorite episodes of that season. Even Andrew in this season is improved. I enjoyed his character so much more, and for Buffy, she gets back to being Buffy, that kind of bubbly, charismatic character we knew from the earlier seasons. So there's a lot for me that I enjoy about this season. I enjoy getting Fate back as well, and just setting up this huge battle between Buffy and the First. The series finale episode is also a huge strong point to the season. I've seen a lot of series finales over the years, and honestly none of them have come close to what Buffy did. It capped off the season with the best storyline possible, but it also upped the stakes. The entire town of Sunnydale gets swallowed into hell. I think the way they did it, the way they kind of finished off the show's run was absolutely perfect, and I couldn't really ask for anything else. Yes, the season struggles, particularly in the middle half of it. It does again go a bit too much into the potentials. There's a few plot holes when it comes to the uber vampires, but overall I like the setup of the season, and I like how they capped off the series at the end. Coming into 5th place is season 4. This is a funny season because it is the season that really bridges high school to adulthood. This is a season where you can tell the show didn't fully know what it was going to be as the characters moved from school to college, but I will say with season 4, the first half of the season is absolutely incredible. Almost every episode hits, and rewatching it back recently, I actually came to appreciate it so much more. That first half of the season has some really strong episodes, particularly when Fate comes back and we get that two-parter between her and Buffy, but as well as that we get Hush with the Gentlemen, who are probably the creepiest and scariest villains of all of Buffy. Even the Initiative are actually quite interesting when they're set up. I like Riley in the first half of the season as well. Now I know when they got to the second half of the season, I think the original idea was Professor Walsh was meant to be the big bad, but the actress couldn't commit to the part, so instead they killed her off and we got Adam, who is this second-rate version of the Terminator. He just doesn't work. He has no character, and I think that's maybe where things fall apart. Most of Buffy's big bads have been these great villains, but they've always had a personality, whereas with Adam he has literally zero personality. As well as that, there's a few character decisions I'm not a huge fan of. With Oz in particular, the way he acts in that season is just very out of character. Still, there are a lot of great episodes, but I just think the second half begins to falter. It becomes less and less interesting as it goes on. Even the Initiative, it was a cool concept when it first got revealed in season 4, but as the season went on I just cared less and less about it, and instead I was hoping it wouldn't get carried over to season 5. So for me, this is definitely a middle ground type of season. The first half, as I said, has some of the strongest episodes Buffy has ever done. I like the relationship Buffy has as she goes through college and she really does feel alone, as Willow really kind of finds herself in college and knows who she really is.
Oh.
But at the same time, the second half is just very weak. It's probably the weakest second half of a season I've seen in the entire show. The only reason this gets higher than season 7 is because there are so many good episodes in that first bunch. Next we have season 6. Now this one is regarded as maybe Buffy's most depressing season of its run. This one has always been a favourite of mine though, and I actually enjoyed the darker tone of the season. Some of the most interesting episodes of Buffy are actually in this season. So of course we have Once More with Feeling. It's a brilliant musical episode and probably the best musical episode we've ever gotten on TV, with original songs and some great vocal talent in the episode. Now as well as that though, we have Tabula Rasa, which is a fun episode. I think this reminds me of American Horror Story Asylum. It's a very dark season. It is a lot of trauma constantly coming at you, but when you get to that musical episode, just like the name game, it just is a breath of fresh air. You need it in that season just to lighten the tone of things. But we also have episodes like Normal Again, where Buffy, we find out, is in a psychiatric hospital because Warren has pretty much drugged her to think she is there. I thought that was a fascinating episode, and it does make you question everything about Buffy. Buffy's in this hospital with these doctors telling her that everything she's believed over the last 6 years has been in her mind, and they do kind of play it up in a way where you do think maybe it's real. I love the episode. I've watched that episode so many times, even just as a standalone episode, and it still holds up. Every single character though goes through some form of trauma with this season, either with Buffy coming to terms with being brought back from the dead, the breakdown of Xander and Anya's relationship, or Willow's growing addiction to magic, even Buffy and Spike's toxic relationship. There's so much in this season that just works. Yes, it's a darker season, and you can tell they really made a transition into adulthood. But if you are interested in that kind of stuff, if you like seeing a darker side of your characters, then you will enjoy this season. It is very dark, it is very depressing, but even at the end of the season, they give that glimmer of hope that the characters are going to heal. If this season does one thing right, it really does capture depression and just that feeling of being lost. There's a darker and uglier side to every single character, but each of them are struggling with their own trauma. And for a show with these characters constantly dealing with death, demons, vampires, and this darker nature of the world, that's kind of going to be expected at some point. Now the season still has some humor, and as I said, it's peppered throughout. There's not a huge amount of it in this season, but with the musical episode and some of the more comedic episodes, there is a nice balance when you actually watch the show back. As for the big bad of this season, the trio, I wasn't a huge fan of them. I just kind of found them boring more than anything else. I didn't think the playing field was fair between them and Buffy, and they were just kind of in the way. Now I do like that at the end of the season, the true big bad gets revealed in Dark Willow. Watching the show over the years, I think it was actually cleverly done how Willow's use of magic slowly began to unravel. As far back as season 2 and 3, she was acting quite recklessly with magic, so it does make sense, although I wish they had set it up in a slightly better way with a more engaging villain first. Still, I'm a fan of it. I think they definitely pull it off towards the last couple of episodes, but I actually wish it was a longer arc. We see a lot of her addiction in this episode. We see it get set up, but when Tara gets killed, it does kind of come out of nowhere, and then you're left with a couple of episodes of Dark Willow. Overall, this is a great season. It is quite depressing, it's quite dark, but I thought it was a nice little detour for the show to go in. And again, I do like that they brought back the lighter tone in season 7, but as a season itself, it is one of my favourites. Coming in at third place is season 5. Now this is a season of Buffy the Vampire Slayer where they pulled off one of the best retcons of TV, and by doing it, honestly, they just made the show even more engaging.
Can we go now?
Yes, I'm talking about Dawn. She is irritating, she is in the way, she is all of those things, but I think when you get to season 5 of a show and you want to really flip the lid, you want to introduce a new character, they couldn't have done it in a better way. They wanted to introduce a sister to Buffy and really shake up her family dynamic, and they could do it with the use of magic. That's what the show was all about, so it was a nice little addition. Yes, people were questioning what the hell was going on in the first few episodes, but if you stick with season 5, it's easily Easily one of the strongest seasons of the show. Introducing Glory as well as an actual god Buffy had to go up against just upped the stakes. She was this ridiculously powerful enemy Buffy had to go up against, and she was also a perfect big bad. She was threatening and wild, but at the same time she was kind of this crazy entitled girl that just kind of moaned and complained her way through the season. She was crazy and trying to end the world one moment and then cracking jokes the next, and that's always what makes a perfect Buffy villain. Now this season also has possibly my favourite episode of Buffy, In the Body. It's an episode where Buffy comes home and discovers her mother has died not through magic or a mystical reason, but instead from an aneurysm, a very human death.
Mom? Mommy?
And it's just a great look and a great portrayal of what grief is throughout the hours of her discovering her mother's body, telling her friends and family, and just everyone going through grief in their own separate ways. It's an absolutely incredible episode. It doesn't really have any music, it just has some really deep dialogue, and it does portray death in a very realistic human way. From Willow not knowing what to wear to the funeral, to Anya not truly understanding death, just everything in this episode hits home. And then there's the gift, which sees Buffy sacrifice herself to save the world in what could have been a perfect cap to the season. Everything builds up to that episode where you are expecting Dawn could possibly die, but more than likely Buffy will save her. So when that twist comes at the end of that episode, it is a tragic end. And given that that could have been the series finale, given that there was issues with the network, whether they're going to switch Buffy to a different network or not, that could have been the series finale, and if it had been, it would have been an absolutely perfect way to cap off the show's run. Next we have season 2, which can really only be described as the season of Buffy and Angel. In its most simplistic form, it's the story of an abusive relationship and shows Buffy making one of the biggest sacrifices of her life. I love season 2, and I did go back and forth whether I'd give this first place or not. I love the story arc of season 2. I think it's probably the strongest story arc overall of the show's run, but why it gets second place is there's not as much great standalone episodes. There are some brilliant standalone episodes in this one. There are so many episodes I do enjoy, but it's just not as strong. What I really like about season 2 though is the villains. When Drusilla and Spike get introduced to the show, particularly because they have a lot of history with Angel, it just upped the ante of the show. The drama came full force. As well as that, Spike and Drusilla were really kooky, bizarre villains. Spike was hilarious in a lot of his scenes, and Drusilla was batshit crazy.
You can't see the stars, love. That's the ceiling.
I loved both of their characters, and even if Angelus did not come into the main storyline towards the end of the season, I would have been happy with just Spike and Drusilla. I loved their characters, I love what they did with them, and they are probably the show's best duo that they've ever had. I think Angel though turning evil halfway through the season definitely elevated the show. It definitely made a show must-see TV. Just the way he terrorized Buffy and the way he kind of played with her emotions in this really brutal but also brilliant way that was just captivating to watch. But I do think the turning point of the show was the death of Jenny Calendar. Suddenly there were stakes to the show. Suddenly anyone could die. And for a show like Buffy, you kind of got the sense when you got to season 2 that the characters were going to be safe. There would be a monster of the week, there would be a big bad, and everything would be fine. So when Jenny Calendar gets killed halfway through the season, and as well as that it is by Angelus, the stakes just get raised incredibly high. From there the show went from strength to strength with a ton of great episodes and performances also between Sarah Michelle Gellar and David Boreanaz. But my favourite season finale actually belongs to season 2, that two-parter season finale where Buffy has to kill Angel. For me, that's what a season finale is. That's probably maybe my first big season finale of a show I'd watched, and it's one I always remember. I remember watching that back and just feeling like the stakes were very, very high, and anybody could get killed in that episode. Finally, taking first place is season 3, where season 2 had maybe the show's best big bad. It did kind of falter with just too much monster of the week episodes. Season 3 though, it didn't really have that problem. It had a new big bad, but it also had some great standalone episodes. It was also the final school year of the show, and you could kind of feel that change was on the way, that things were starting to pick up and the show would go in new directions. You didn't know where all the characters would go. Would they be in the next season? And because of college, anyone really could have been killed off. Now this also is the season that introduced us to Fate. She was pretty much the opposite of Buffy in every single way, and I do think her going rogue and becoming a villain for the show was again just the best decision they could have made. It just made the entire thing so interesting to see two Slayers face off. But as well as that, she did kind of add this new energy to the show. Fate at the end of it was a tragic character that didn't really get the chances Buffy had, and it was interesting to see that power fall into the wrong hands. I also loved her relationship with the mayor in the second part of the season, but just like a jealous coming in at the midway mark of season 2, Fate teaming up with the mayor just added an extra layer to the season. Standalone episodes were also incredibly strong in this one. We had Amends, which was Buffy's own little Christmas episode. It's one of my favorites. I love what they did with the characters of Buffy and Angel, and just to show how far this trauma had actually affected them. But we also had some fun episodes with Band Candy, and one of my favorites, not everyone's favorite, but Gingerbread, which plays on the notion of fairy tales. The big bad was also one of the strongest we've had in Buffy. With the mayor, he was this new breed of big bad. He wasn't a vampire this time. He was something else that really was an interesting big bad. He had this presence to him where he was definitely dangerous, but at the same time he was obsessed with cleaning people's hands, with really not getting any germs anywhere around his office or on himself, which just lent itself to a lot of comedic moments, which again just makes a great Buffy big bad. As well as that climactic battle between the class itself and the mayor, where they really just go to war with this giant snake, was a great way to send off high school. They blew up the school, which again, just like the final episode itself of Buffy, they went as big as they could. It's this all-out war between these teenagers and these darker characters of the night. I'm a huge fan of season 3. It's not personally story arc wise my favorite story arc, but as a season itself I think it is the best season. It has a great arc, it has one of the best arcs of Buffy, but it also has some great standalone episodes, and it's really where the show came into its own and knew its characters. The actors were very comfortable in their characters. They knew how to balance that darker aspect of the show and the comedy, and it's just a great season. It's a great send-off to the high school years before going into those adult years we got with later seasons. But guys, that is just my ranking of every season of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. As I said, if you want, make sure you leave your rankings down below. I am dying to see what everyone thinks of Buffy, what they think of my ranking, but also I want to know your rankings. As well as that guys, if you do want me to do more videos on Buffy, make sure you let your suggestions down below also. Now if you do want to see more videos like this one, you can click any of the links down below, and I will see you guys in the next one.